Today, we're sitting down with Elad Fish, a very well-known name in the RC jet community. Elad isn't just a great pilot, he's an experienced builder and a wealth of knowledge when it comes to turbine jets. He's also part of the team CARF-models. In this episode, we'll talk about his beginnings in RC and turbine jets, the tricks behind perfect landings, the gear he trusts, and he might even give us a sneak peek into his workshop. So, if you're into RC jets, you're in for a treat. Get ready to dive deep into the world of turbine jets with Elad Fish. Well, Elad,
Hey,
how you doing, man?
doing great. How are you? Good.
Good. It's so good to chatting with you. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I'd love to get started just covering a bit how you got started into RC.
I grew up in Israel, and over there's a very nice and organized club for air modeling. I think I started at the age of like a third grade, something like that, and it it was back in the days. I'm not sure if it's still like that today. I hope so, but back in the days was something very common that a lot of kids would go to like after class school like programs, and a very popular program was air modeling. And it was a nice organization where you grow into it. So you start at like third or fourth grade, and then when you get to the age of like 14, you can start, teaching one of the classes for the younger kids. I think at around the age of 15, they take you to like a 2 week seminar in a high class college in Israel, and it's like 2 weeks where you stay there the whole time, and they teach you everything you could ever possibly want to know about air modeling, including taking you into like wind tunnels and testing all these
Wow.
kind of things. And they teach you about how to teach. They teach you about how to build, flying skills, everything that you probably want to have as an instructor for building. And then um, once you're finishing this course, you can start managing your own classes. So back in Israel, it was a very developed club. You know, every city in Israel probably has some kind of a club like that, and it's all organized under one umbrella. Mostly focused on free flight gliders. I'm not sure if now that's the case, but back in the days, free flight gliders were the thing over there, and we used to have like 6 competitions a year with about 200 people, which for Israel it seems a lot. Um, yeah. So
Oh, that's really cool. I haven't heard of anything like that anywhere else.
Israel is pretty good in like free flight glidings, like F1A, F1B. For anybody who doesn't know, F1A is just I think a 10 foot, or let's put it like this, like 2.4 meter glider that weighs under a pound. I'm sorry, it has to weigh over a pound, but we would go the extra mile in order to make it exactly like 1 to 2 or 3 grams above the allowed 1 pound. I think it's 410 grams, something like that. Um, and they would teach us skills, with like building with carbon fibers and all these kind of things. And as a kid, doing all these molds and stuff and building everything from scratch was just amazing. I think that nowadays with phones and computers, it's a little bit hard um, to compete over the attentions of kids and get them uh, to do some air modeling. It takes a lot
We,
more time in order to get into air modeling, and it's disappointing sometimes in the beginning, and it's much easier to just click on the phone.
um, did you basically get hooked up pretty quickly with RC since then? Have you been pretty consistent with RC, or did you ever like take a big break and then came back?
So I just started RC, I would say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, not that long ago. Up until then, I was just like doing free flight gliding. Um, went to I think won the second runner up on the World Championship for F1A, representing Israel. So we were always laughing at like RC modelers. You know, we had the joke where you can take a table, hook a motor to it, and it will fly. um, but then, yeah, I mean, I started flying like 3D planes. Um, Fell in love with the whole, aerobatics things and all that kind of things. And one day I went to Button Willow for like a get together. I saw Dave Searles flying his jet upside down, and I was like, "Wow, that's really cool! I didn't know jets can actually do that." And I think that was like 6 years ago or so, not that long ago, 5 years ago maybe. Because I've seen many jets, but I've seen mostly people in my field having issues with them and maybe just flying around, not doing anything. It was so boring to see it. It was, every time they would land and they would break something.
Yeah.
It was just like a total hassle to see it. Um, so, so seeing Dave Searles flying his, I think it was T3, just opened my eyes, and I went home and was like, I'm gonna build a jet. Everybody scared me about, oh, you're gonna have to use like special glues and Hysol and stuff. Maybe you should buy a used one. But, I went and bought a new one, and it's a virus that it's really hard to get back from. Once you get that virus, that's it. You're done.
What was your first model? Your first jet?
So I bought a Top RC Aspire, which was a great
Hmm.
plane, especially for the price. Um, and right after, I went to Best in the West, and I saw the German team flying the Mephisto, and it was a love in first sight. And I knew I'm gonna have the plane. I didn't care; it was just my second jet. So it was I've never spent that kind of money on an airplane before, so it was a major step for me. But the desire to have that plane and seeing the German pilots flying it the way they flew it with a like a perfect envelope, and it was just incredible to see. It's something I've never seen in my life, so I had to have it. Um,
Were they already doing all the thrust vector stuff with the flips and the hovers and everything?
yeah, they were doing it amazingly. It was it was just amazing. Especially I think it was Alex Ruff and Spencer Notquist, and it's amazing just to be around these people. It's beautiful to see them.
How was that transition into that first jet outside of or other than that initial kind of a big expense, bit of fear, different type of components, different type of line. Did it end up feeling pretty reasonable? Did it feel like a major challenge? And
So I wasn't afraid to ask for a lot of help. So I had Lior Zehalvi from Israel, and he helped me a lot with the beginning, with a lot of tips. He has a lot of knowledge in electronics, for example, which was amazing to get from him. Um, and I asked Andreas, the owner of CARF, for tips and stuff, and there's a wonderful thread on RC Universe that back in the days was very developed. Dave Wilshire, and many people were actually posting the pictures, and it was a fun build, not that difficult. It was To me, it was really hard to get into hovering. It took me a long time. I'm not kidding. Probably good 10 hours of flying. I would say what, like 50 flights until I was able to hover. It's very different than 3D prop planes. The reason is
Mhm.
that the engine reacts. maybe 3-4 seconds after you actually give the action. So that takes time, and there's zero wind on the surfaces. So while in 3D plane, prop plane, you have lots of wind on the wings and elevator and all that. You give a reaction or something, and it reacts immediately. It doesn't work like that with jet. With jet, the only thing that works is the vector. And the hardest thing to learn when hovering is that there is flying and there's hovering. The area in between is where you see planes starting to do like that, right? So you really need to get the plane out of flying and into hovering. It's pretty much like what Elon Musk's missiles are doing when they're landing. So the way to get into this position, I mean, you can fly and then slowly, gradually do it. It's probably harder. The easier thing would be just to do a flip or something, which basically zero out your speed and then have your nose high enough to get into hovering and not flying. So that's
Yeah, sounds like you want to reduce that transition period between the more standard flying and the you're basically in a hover.
exactly, and it's something that mentally it's like hard to figure it out because, I mean, you're used to giving like down elevator whenever you want to go down, right? But in fact, the only way you're going to have control is by going into full hover. If you're in between, it's kind of a gray zone that you don't want to be in. Or
Do you
if you're in between, you actually want to have a movement, so you want to go down, for example. Um,
do you have vector thrust enabled through the whole flight, or do you just flip a switch when you're about to do those type of like 3D maneuvers with the Mephisto?
so mostly, I have about it's on during the entire flight, but during regular flight, it's on about 30% throws. And I have one switch that when I want to go into hover, it raises the gain of the gyro from, let's say, regular flight, I would be at about 30%. It would raise the gain to, I would say, like 85%. It's very high. It will increase the throws, even though we just said that the throws doesn't really matter. It will increase the throw a little bit, and it will change the vector throws from 30% to about 100%. So again, it takes a lot of practice because first of all, you need to be closer to you. You really need to pay attention to the angle of the plane, whether it's the difference between being 80 degrees to 90 degrees is night and day, and then 95 you're going backwards, or if you're a little bit like 5 or 10 degrees to the side, it matters a lot. So you really need to do the hover closer to you in order to see it really well. You can't really do it high in the sky. You just can't see it, especially if you're underneath it. And again, going down in a, let's say, a 45-degree angle is what everybody wants to do, but it's really hard because you have to be in a movement. Once you stop the movement, the plane starts shaking, or because it's right in between the flying and hovering. So really the action would be like to fly, do the flip, going down, and as you go down, I mean, you really would need to be in a full hover mode right in front of you. And then if you want to fly it around and do some rounds or figure eight or whatever while you're hovering, the whole movement is basically with a little bit of rudder. So you would fly, or a little bit rudder right, it will fall. Really, it's all like tiny movements. It's really not a lot. You really see the plane like that, and you think it's not going to do anything, it's just going to stay like that. But slowly you see it's moving and completing the turn.
How much are things like tweaking and tuning the gyro especially come into play here? Like that's For me, that I haven't done any 3D with jets,
Yeah.
but I have a lot of experience with propeller planes. I think that type of gyro tuning is something that feels intimidating just because I've basically not used gyros before, and now the first time you're playing with gyros is on a $10,000-$15,000 plane.
Yeah.
How much of that is something that is well understood, and the manufacturer gives you these are the games you should use. It works pretty well out of the box. Versus how much of that is you have to spend hours and hours like trying different things until you find what works well.
So generally, my motto in life is I don't want to invent the wheel. Okay, I'm coming from music and all that, and in music, you listen to a lot of reference and you come up with something that you heard the chords here, you had the rhythm over there, you mix it all together. With airplanes, um, there's so many great pilots who already flew the Mephisto. I don't feel the need of like recreating the gyro settings or anything like that. So um, I basically use the gyro settings that's in the manual, and I didn't touch it since then. I think the only plane that I played with the gyro was the J10, just because it didn't have the settings in the manual. And I'm using the Cortex gyro, which I find amazing. I really love it. Most of the times in most planes, I'll put it in. I wouldn't even touch it. It doesn't need any tuning. Um, so yeah, I mean, with the Mephisto, I copied the settings from the manual. Most other planes, I would just use the stock settings.
You're currently part of the team CARF. I always see you supporting the teacher and flying all
Yeah.
their cool jets. Can you tell us how you got involved with them?
I think we started in Florida Jets of like 2019, where I had my Mephisto over there, and I think Andreas saw the benefit of having me on the team because I had the dedication and the willingness to travel around the country with my planes and invest in building and really flying them a lot. I think I wouldn't exaggerate if I'll say that my Mephisto has the most hours in the US. I'm on the second service of the King Tech, like 50 hours. Maybe I'm wrong. Probably Chetan from Atlanta or something probably has more than me. No, but I really love the brand. I think the brand is really good. Like you get a kit, and every time I'm getting one, I'm impressed. And you can see I'm actually building right now, and it's a fun assembly to do. For me, it's like building a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
While other manufacturers, they would release things before it would have been tried. They would let the clients kind of like try and error things. While I think CARF um, is giving the planes to like experienced pilots, uh, which test it and makes all these suggestions, and the the fixing of like issues of a new plane would be so fast, um, that you're whatever you're getting is like a finished product. You don't have to work into it. Yeah, but I think it's a I think I'm grateful for being in that team. I think that what makes us a really good team is the people. I would say that being around the German team is fantastic as well. They're I would call them again. I would refer to music a little bit, but for me, they're like classical players. It's as if they learned all the notes and charts and stuff, and you see them flying, and they can fly hard, but mostly they will just fly beautifully. And to me, it's a great reference, and I always look up to them, and like, and that's my inspiration, for example. So being in that team and flying next to them, I mean, as we just spoke about the Mephisto in that Florida Jets. 2019. That's, I think, where I really learned how to hover, because they were just next to me. So I think having a person who knows what they're doing next to you is a huge shortcut. Generally in jets, not even or even in RC.
Yeah.
We spoke earlier about what are the issues that most people are having in this hard hobby. First of all, let's be honest. It's a very hard hobby to have. It's an expensive hobby. It's something that you'll make one small mistake and it will cost you tens of thousands of dollars and a lot of humiliation and with a walk of shame when you come back.
Yep.
So it's unlike, you go and you ride a jet ski, or you I don't know, you do some any kind of other hobby. You can't really mess up so much, but with RC it's really like you can make a very simple mistake and it will cost you a lot of money. um, so for that, my recommendation is to have a mentor next to you. Always have somebody who knows what they're doing until you know what you're doing, until you think you know what you're doing. Um, there's a lot of small things that you learn from experience. If we're talking about flaps, and then you have a servo and you don't make it like um, geometrically lock when it's flaps down. You learn the hard way that that it's that you're gonna burn a servo, no matter what's kind of servo you're gonna have. All kind of stuff of like Loctites on screws and stuff.
What are the typical mistakes you see people make when they're building their jets specifically?
Um, a lot of fueling issues. They would make the tubing too long. With zip tie things. A lot of electrical issues sometimes I see with people trying to make their own wiring, which I highly support, but it needs to be done correctly. For example, I bought a jet from someone, and the connector, I don't have a connector here, but the connector had like wires sticking out from the pin just because it was, too long. So all these kind of like small things, which I highly support people who are building their own jets, but I even more supporting groups that are doing it together. I think first of all, it's the most fun you can have in the hobby is build together with other people, which I don't think people do much these days. But I would really encourage people to build together. And if you can't do that, then at least have somebody professional go over your jet before you before you fly. A lot of jets would be built to sustain 10 to 15 flights, and then the problem starting after that. For example, if people would not use like a little bit of a super glue in the servos screws or something like that, they would get loose after a while, and the plane will get some stress. So a good build is a build that will last for 50 hours. And a bad one would be one that lasts a few flights.
Yeah.
In terms of flying, I see many people doing mistakes in landings. There's the tendency of like beginners would come and they would position their plane about 150 feet at the beginning of the runway, lower the engine to idle and start gliding, which I find like a huge mistake. What I would recommend is that people would fly their plane in flaps down gear down, just fly it as if you're, coming for a low pass, and practice landing that way. Um, Maybe coming to a landing with some power. The more power you have on the engine, the more control you have. It's not necessarily means that you're going to be faster. Actually, it's a very common mistake. Some people think that when you throttle up, you'll have a lot of speed, and it's not the case. For example, if you're stalling and you'll put full throttle, you'll be at zero speed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, if you're diving and you're on idle, you can be over 100 miles an hour. So coming and controlling throttle management at landing is crucial for flying jets, especially. You can get away with it in prop planes, but flying jets, you really need to know about the angle of attack, of the alpha, when you're coming to landing. Some planes, like F-16s and stuff, would be great to come at 10, 20 degrees alpha, and you can do the whole turn into the runway, and it will fly great and it will land great that way. Any like It will work with an F-100 likes it a lot. The F-16 likes it. A J-10. Any sport jet would probably you'll be best with 0 or maybe 5%. Really not a lot of alpha when landing. Maybe just when floating right at the end, but the whole way you want to have the lowest speed with the highest power you can get. I know it sounds a little bit tricky, but that's basically the thing that it looks great, it looks scale, and it gives you the most control.
Yeah, so you basically want a relatively high angle of attack rather than just come pretty flat.
Depends on the plane. If it's a sports plane, you probably won't be able to get away with more than 5 degrees of alpha. If it's a scale jet, we're talking about anything with a swept wing on F-16, something like that, then you can get with a lot of alpha. You can land an F-16 at 20% alpha, and it will just look great and fly great.
It seems like people usually struggle significantly more with scale ones.
Yeah.
On their landings.
Just because you have a higher wing load. So you have a lot more energy to stop. And the greater the wing load, the faster the speed needs to be in order to stay in the air. So they're kind of fighting each other. I would say the same thing for turbine weight or turbine size. A lot of people would tend to say, "Hey, let me get the bigger turbine." For example, there's let's take the Rebel Max. Okay, so Rebel Max is a huge plane, but it will fly on anything from 180 to 300. The range is huge. And let's assume you're at sea level. If you're in Colorado flying at 6,000 feet, yeah, it's a different environment. You need about 30% more power for your turbine. But if you're at sea level, there's absolutely no reason to put more than a 210 on a Rebel Max. When you, for example, the Mephisto will also fly on a 210, even a 180, I think. I know for a fact people who are flying it on a 220 Team Nobody from England, and they fly it amazingly well. The more turbine you have, the bigger the size, the harder it is to land, and the harder it is to control the flight. And I'll give you the example. When I'm flying my Rebel Max on a 210, I can come with 10-20% of throttle for low passes and all that, and getting the throttle from 20% to 100 is much faster than getting the turbine from 0 to 80, for example. From 0 to 20 to 30%, it takes a lot of time for a turbine. So if the turbine is too big and you're coming for a low pass or landing and you want to go around, if it's too big, you have to put it on idle. Otherwise, you have too much thrust. And then taking it from idle to 70, 80% or 100%, it takes a lot of time. That's where the big turbines really fails. And especially in the Mephisto, when you fly it with a 320, even though it can fly on a 200, you're coming to landing with a lot of residual thrust. Basically, you need to. It took me a lot of time to realize what to do or how to land it right, because I would finish the runway every time. The Mephisto, if you're flying with 0% alpha and no crow on the ailerons, it will just basically fly. You can almost fly it on idle, okay? Plus, it takes the 320 takes about 5 or 6 seconds to go from 30% to 0. It really takes time until it idles on like 30,000 RPM. So the idea with the Mephisto is to get the angle of attack at about 5%, do all the turn, be in the same altitude of like, let's say 40, 50 feet during the entire approach, and then gradually lowering it down without lowering the nose. You lower the nose, you gain a lot of speed. That's one of the major things for landing. People would position themselves before the runway and they would lower the nose and they wouldn't understand why they're getting so much speed. The idea is to realize that the plane would fly less or shorter if it's in an inefficient alpha. Got it? So if you're at like 5% alpha, it's not very efficient for gliding, and for that reason, it's not going to glide further away. And it's kind of like, it's the opposite of what we think, because we want the plane to stop, so we would lower the nose. But it's the exact opposite thing of what we need to do. We need to actually keep it like 5%, wait until it loses all the energy and lands. That's the only way to bring it shorter rather than finishing the runway.
Yeah, it's pretty much the opposite of what you should do when you have a dead stick, right? Like if you suddenly kill power on any airplane, you want to always pitch down a little bit to get that like best glide.
Right.
I think here you want to do a bit of the opposite. You want to actually probably increase a bit of angle of attack, slow the plane down, use a bit of throttle to keep the airplane still in the air, but moving a bit slower.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we've talked about your Mephisto. I didn't realize that was your second plane. That's a pretty cool second jet. What did you? I think I've seen you flying a lot of really cool jets outside of the Mephisto. I think I've seen you with an F-100, the Big Bay Hawk.
Yeah.
What have you been flying since then, since that Mephisto?
So I have the Su-27, which I'm actually building one right now in the same scheme. Same scheme that I have, same as my first one. I'm building it for Frank.
And that's the one also with thrust vector?
Yes. So it has thrust vectoring. It has Jetsmont 166, 2 of them, which I actually sent them now to be upgraded to 182. They have a thing where they're actually sending the new ones as 182. So these are kind of old, and it's time for service. Send it back in. I think they're replacing the main compressor. I'm not exactly sure. I'll let them do their job. I really like Jetsmont. They've been treating me very well, and service for me was always great. And I have them on WhatsApp if I have questions, and they're pretty quick to respond. So I think I have Jetsmont on most of my airplanes, other than Mephisto, which I have King Tech, and I have another 160 of King Tech. But I also have JetCats and all that kind of things. I think all turbines are great. you should really find the one that matches your budget and you can get good service. So I think that's really important, because at one point or another the turbine's going to break or you need to service it. It's not something that lasts forever. Going back to the SU, so I had the SU with the thrust vectoring. And the SU was meant for a 100 to 120 size without vectoring. Okay, I think it was up until Marcus Rumer took it. It was actually at somebody else's place, but he took it and really gave some love to it, and flew it at jet power, and that's where I fell in love with this plane. It was just incredible to see this plane like hovering, because it's a scale jet that hovers. It's beautiful, just beautiful.
It looks pretty crazy. I think I've seen some of his videos. It looks pretty crazy, and it looks like a big bird too.
Yeah. So that what drawn me into that.
Is the 3D pretty different between that one and the Mephisto?
Oh yeah, so the Mephisto it's much easier to hover. The wing load is not a lot. So as I was saying, the SU was not meant for hovering. It was meant for just like to be a very nice scale jet. That's why the details on it are very details. You can see a lot of other, I call them imitations, but other manufacturers who are bringing up SUs of their own. They're not nearly as detailed as this one. There's a lot of details on this one, which CARF makes, and it really was meant to be a scale jet. So it's much heavier. So when I built my first one, and I built it, with the minimum amount of weight, I didn't add too many components to it. I didn't use the front scale. I fixed them in the front slots, the ones, what I'm talking about? These ones. These ones. I just fixed them in place with a push rod to save weight. And mine was like 23.5 kilo with smoke tanks and everything, without fuel. Okay, so just fuel in the UAT. So if you think about it, you're taking 23.5, and this is a plane that was supposed to be under 25 kilogram wet, so with fuel and everything. But when you add two big turbines, the 166s, and thrust vectoring and everything, you add a lot to it. I think the wet weight is about 27, 28, maybe even 29 with smoke. 166s will produce together 33 kilograms, but when you put them behind a thrust tube, you lose about 10 to 20% of the thrust. So essentially, you really need to hover. I could only hover with mine when I got to like 60% fuel, 50% fuel. And it wasn't very easy. I'm hoping that now with the 182s, it's going to be much easier. Another improvement that you can do to it is to add fuel bags, which I'm not exactly sure if it's allowed here in the States or not. Some people says that, I tried to find any kind of mentioning about it, but I couldn't find anything on the AMA. So if anybody knows.
Yeah, I remember a while ago seeing somebody kind of complaining that we don't allow that here in the US, even though that would be better for many reasons.
So I couldn't find any rules about it. If you look at the AMA guidelines and all that, I couldn't find the word bag in the whole guideline. Anyway, so that would be nice. I think you can actually build this plane. Actually, Jordan Factor, which we know, a good friend, is building one that's in a beautiful scheme, and I think he's gonna be under 25 kilograms with fuel bags and some other improvements. smaller turbines, and I think he'll be able to make a very nice version out of it. Marcus Rummer was flying his with a 130s, JetCat 130s, which I have no idea how he did that. But I think he shorted he made the fuel tank smaller and did all kind of things to make his under 25 kilo. It was really like it's a different plane than what we get.
Mm-hmm.
He made a lot of improvement to that. He used lighter servos. Really did a good job over there to save weight. Yeah, so this one, this is the third one that I'm building. I built one for myself, which I still have and fly. I built another one for another friend who's flying it with two 180s. You can imagine that the plane is heavier even than what I have.
Yeah.
And this third one that I'm building is actually the right way I think it should be. And I'm building it without thrust vectoring, and I'm building it with two Jetsmont 122s. I think even with these, without vectoring and these small turbines, I think you can do beautiful high alpha, and it will look probably as good.
Yeah, I'm personally not a huge fan of the kind of 3D with a scale plane. One thing I did see recently is I think it was somebody with a F-16, maybe a pilot RC could be, and it had thrust vector, and it was really cool because he was not actually doing things like hover, so it wasn't like totally unrealistic.
Mhm.
But he was taking advantage of the thrust vector to do certain maneuvers that you could actually see the full scale plane do, like when you do let's say a square loop and you see the tail kind of sliding a little bit.
Yeah.
Like it gave the impression of a plane being bigger, like has much more inertia. It's not the inertia, it's just that the thrust vector lets you kind of slide the tail a little bit more. It looked really cool. It looked kind of scale while still using the thrust vector. I thought it was very interesting. I haven't seen many people doing that.
Cool. Yeah. It's I don't really like all the the flips and stuff. Even though I do them, I don't. I really like scale performance, and even when you take this SU and you do a snake maneuver or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
it really looks cool. It looks like very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the right way to do
So
this SU-27 is without vectors. That's something that I support now. Other than the SU, I have my weekend plane is the Rebel Max. When I go to bigger fields, other than my field, because my field is very small, I would take the Bolt, which is an amazing fly. You can fly it slow, fast.
Is that the new one?
Yeah. I think the Bolt is about 3 years old. They created it's the modern version of the not the Ultra Flash, the Ultra Lightning. Okay. And the build of it is
Yeah, that one looks fast.
yeah, it looks fast. It's like mostly built out of carbon. It's amazingly strong. The build inside is beautiful. It's all like get together. All the parts are like getting together perfectly. You could see the fuel tank sitting around the spar and all that. So the build of it is very advanced. I mean, you can probably see most of it on the website, on the CARF website. And they show a lot of the construction side, the construction process. So another fun plane is the J10. If you want to learn how to fly, probably Eurosport would be better, which I don't have. So probably Eurosport would be the easiest thing and would even be similar to the SU flight characteristic. So if you want to practice before you buy an SU, get a Eurosport. It's also important for me to say that flying a thrust vectoring plane like the SU with dual turbines is not an easy task. The more components you add, the more issues you're going to have. So you need to take take care of two turbines that sometimes will not start, or I don't know what, or
Yeah, that's definitely as
two-
complex as you can get within a kind of stock
yeah,
enough airplane, right? Like going thrust vector plus dual turbine, it's definitely not the easiest.
yeah, and if you're making it very heavy because of the bigger turbines and all that, then you're gonna have to be extra careful in landings, for example, or even takeoffs, because the
Hmm.
gear or the gear mounts were not supposed to take a 30-kilogram airplane. They were supposed to take something much lighter. Um, Other than CARF, I have an F-16 BVM 1.6 that I really love. I think it's an excellent plane. Um, so going back to CARF, I have the F-100, which is incredible. It's like a sports.
That one is beautiful.
Yeah, you can fly it fast, you can fly it slow, and it's very, very, very impressive. Going for a low pass with smoke, air breakdown, lights, it's an experience. It's amazing.
I've
Um,
seen some pictures of yours on some event, and if you don't look extremely carefully, it almost looks like the real thing.
yeah,
It,
yeah, yeah,
it looks really, really good.
yeah. With this F-100, I had a lot of fun doing the weathering on it. Um, Usually I was really afraid. So on my Su-27, CARF was doing all the weathering, and they did an amazing job. So when it was time to order the F-100, of course I wanted to order it with weathering, and Andreas was like, "Well, that's gonna be your project. You're gonna do the weathering this time." And I was like, "Are you sure I'm not gonna do it that well?" And it turned out to be a very fun, long project, but it helped me learn a lot about it. For example, you have the hot section of the F-100. Um, I'm not ashamed to say that I did it probably 4 times. So I did it, wiped it off, did it again, wiped it off, and at the fourth time, I got the result that I really wanted. Um, um,
Nice.
yeah, and then you have all um, the scuffing. So what you would do? I mean, if I'll show you a picture of how the plane looked before the weathering, it looks like a toy. And after the weathering, it looks really like scale. And basically, what you do, you take I mean, it combines with a lot of panels. There's a lot of lines. So you mask panels, and you would scuff
Hmm.
them in like different way, and it makes it look as if it's like aluminum panel. And then when you add some oil, like the black paint, like oil paint, um, that gets into all these grooves, it really looks real. It really, makes it looks like a scale jet that aged a little bit.
Hmm. Has been used, yeah. I know. I would be terrified of doing any of those things and messing up the plane.
Well, so that's the beauty of it. You can always do it and wipe it off. I mean, I think in the first, working with oil paint is really easy. I mean,
Hmm.
you can do it, and if it doesn't work out, I think within the first week it will wipe very easily with Windex. Okay, um, and after the first week, alcohol will take it off real quick, or maybe Windex with a lot of scrubbing. But it's something that you can do and learn, and if you don't do it right, you do it again.
Hmm. You mentioned Roll Max as one of the kind of your most probably often used airplanes, like your weekend plane.
Yeah,
That's a big plane too. Have you tried the Roll Pro?
yeah. I tried the Pro. It's a much faster plane.
How do they compare?
Yeah, so the Pro is a much faster plane, heavier wing loading, um, and to be honest, I mean, I like the Max more because it's very unique. I think the price is almost the same. I think the difference between the Pro and the Max would be like $1,000. The gear is the
Hmm.
same. Almost the engine is almost the same. You would buy a 160 or 180 for the Pro, and you can do 200 for the Max. So it's or 180 for the Max.
Mhm.
So, I mean, the Max is really a plane that everybody should have. It's just an amazing plane. Everybody can fly it. It's a slow flyer. It's a fast flyer if you want it to be, and you can really learn aerobatics on it. It it gives you time to think while you're doing all the maneuvers.
Yeah, when I've seen it in person, it looks also like it can do aerobatics really well while still flying pretty slow. Like usually I
Yeah,
see people flying aerobatics with jets and they are at like 80% plus throttle so that, especially in night
exactly.
flights, the airplane doesn't fall like a rock.
Yes.
The Rebels, it looks like they are able to just do any aerobatic flight at like pretty slow speed, which is pretty cool to see. Kind
Yeah.
of that close distance flying.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like people see the Max in a low pass or in landing, and they're like, it's gonna fall out of the sky. It's impossible that it flies that slow. Yeah, but it
Mhm.
does it.
What's your general kind of go-to equipment when you are speccing out a new jet for yourself?
Yeah.
What's the typical? I know that it's plain. It's gonna probably have slightly different equipment, but what are your typical go-to kind of brands, models of
Okay.
servos, radio system,
So we'll start with
gyro?
radio systems. So radio, I would use Jetty. I used to fly Futaba up until the point where I needed to build a Mephisto, and it was just I didn't have the amount of equipment, the amount of the data that I need. Basically, the beauty about remember in the beginning of the conversation, I was mentioning all the people who were flying jets and failed, and they would have issues with landing and all these kind of things. I feel like with the amount of data that I have from the Jetty, it helps me to prevent so many issues. I'm getting telemetry alert on consumption of power. So, for example, if my plane consumes more than 6 or 7 amps, I'll get an alert. And I'll get an alert whether it's a short amount of time or a long amount of time. And basically, for example, if you have a servo that got binded to something, um, you can see it right up front when you start the plane. I always look at the amount of consumption that my plane consumes. So when it's on the ground, I want to see anywhere from, let's say, maximum of 0.7, 0.8 amps on each battery. If it's more than that, I know that I have some kind of a problem. It really helps, especially when you have a plane with two servos on the same surface. Sometimes these surfaces, every 50 flights, it would need some kind of a small adjustment. And you can see it when you look at the consumption, even when the plane is on the ground. When the plane is in the air, um, it gives me data on what's the consumption when I deploy flaps. So sometimes I would see that certain planes, you really need to slow them down. For example, the Bolt. If I don't really slow it down or even open the flaps when I'm like going up, I will consume 7 to 8 amps easily, which I don't want to have. So this specific radio gives me a lot of data that helps me keep the plane and avoid all these kind of issues. For example, if you fly in a jet event and there's 6 people flying around you, um, you're not. I mean, maybe you're gonna be able to see a flame out because of a trail of smoke, but sometimes if it's a fuel issue, um, you're not going to see that smoke and you're not going to hear the plane. So having or sometimes you fly the plane and you do an inverted flight and some smoke goes out of the pipe and it looks like a flame out, but it's not. So getting the
Mhm.
alerts of a flame out is very important to me. I'll give you another example. I had an issue with my F100 one time where I had some debris in my UAT after many flights, and I didn't get full RPM. And I was flying it, and it feels like I'm flying it on a. It has a 250. it feels like I'm flying it on a 180.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm not getting enough power. I couldn't do the maneuvers. So I was able to look at the remote and see that at my max throttle, I'm getting to like 97,000 RPM instead of 111. So that kind of information helps me a lot, and I'm dependent on that. With the Jetty, I mean, you can do all these kind of like safety programming, like making sure the smoke will not be turned on when you don't have when your engine is not running. So you're making a switch that will only allow the smoke to be turned on when you have over 30,000 RPM. You can make in the SU, for example, I think it's amazing. What you can do is you can install Hall sensors, which are like proximity sensors. So it will only close the gear doors when the gear has been fully deployed. So every plane with like really, really big struts or wheels, I think the wheels in the SU weighs like 2 or 3 pounds each. Wow. So it's a lot to deploy. Plus, it deploys them and it rotates them. So it's a very crazy German engineering system, that they did over there. But let's face it, any big gear in any plane, if you take off and do a maneuver right after, it might not withstand all the G-force, and then it will not fold. And then if you have a gear door that's trying to close on a wheel that was not fully retracted, you can bind the servo, you can burn the plane in the air. And having a Hall sensor that notifies you whenever the gear was fully deployed or retracted, and then the gear doors automatically close on it, for me, it's priceless. It's something that if you fly a big scale jet like a Hawk, an L-39, an SU, anything like that, it's a must-have for sure.
I've definitely seen Yeti being extremely popular between jet people here, at least in the US.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I always see just people either flying a Spectrum, some JR, some Futaba. But then when you go to a jet event, it seems like the standard is Yeti. So I think this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not very. Maybe you can do it with other remote. I'm not sure. I haven't really tried. It was just very easy to do it with Jetty. And again, going back to the advice of having a mentor next to you, you should fly the radio that your mentor is flying. It's just going to be the easiest because programming a plane is very crucial. If you want to have a sport jet that will be precise, it needs to be programmed right. You can't have one servo going more than the other, or when you deploy flaps, you want them all together. Your throws needs to be equal. So programming is very crucial. That's why I think whenever I had the Jetty, I had some mentors next to me that flew Jetty. That's what I did. And I'm really happy from it right now. It's kind of something that just works. So a setup of Jetty and Cortex, which is just amazing. I wish I could find a replacement for it. You know what? Because sometimes they have period where they don't have it in stock. That's the time where you look elsewhere and you're trying other brands and it just doesn't work. So I'm always going back to Cortex. So Jetty with Cortex, CB210. In my SU, I have CB400 just because I needed luck. I think I'm using all 24 channels over there. What else? Turbines. Again, I think all turbines are great. I use JetSmons because I like the service and they work great for me. The price is good. What other? Oh, servos. I used to use MKS. I think they were great. I moved to Savox. I think that you're getting the same quality at 40% less price. So um,
Is there any particular servo models that you tend to default to, or it
yeah,
depends a lot on the particular plane?
actually, I have one here. Look what a advertisement. So this is the 2290. These are great. These are amazing. These are just workhorses. They're great. I would be happy to put them everywhere. I think they're like 150 before the discounts you can get on AIM or all these kind of stores. There's also here I have here 2292. These are it's I think it's the exact same servo, but it's twice as fast and less power. I did some experiments, and what I've seen is that the 2292 will have more consumption, a lot more consumption because it works a lot harder. So 2290 would be a default one that I would put without even thinking. On my bolt, for example, I have a 2290 all around. But I did experiment with a few of the 2292 on surfaces like, for example, Rebel Max elevator or ailerons. I think that in combination with a good gyro, it can be even better because they're much faster. You need to know that they will consume more. You'll need a little bit bigger battery, or just charge the batteries every fewer flights. Let's put it like that.
What about servos for flaps?
Again, 2290s. I think these are
Same?
yeah. These are I don't remember. I want to say like 70 kilograms. So these are great. These are just amazing.
Yeah, no, those are pretty strong. Yeah, I know that people use those even like in large scale 3D planes.
Yeah, for if you want to save a little bit, then on nose gear you can use 1270, for example. But I don't see if you're building a jet and you're investing $10,000, I don't see why you want to use. I would put the 2290 on all surfaces, except like gear doors. I'll put 1270. That's it. Make it simple.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to go budget on servos on a jet.
Right. Yeah. Batteries. I love what's the name? CHNL, China Hobby Line.
Huh.
Okay, so China Hobby Line, as long as you replace,
I wasn't expecting that one.
as long as you replace their connectors, okay, because they just don't know how to solder their DINs. I use always XT60 connectors with that. These ones.
Yep.
And sometimes they have really good deals on their batteries, like the 2200s, for example, but with DINs. And since I always want to resolder them, I take what they're selling at a really low price and I solder XT60s, and these were great. I don't like the fact that a lot of people would tend to stick to like a special brand of batteries. I don't get it. I think most batteries are being produced in the same factory in China or something like that. It's just like it was not proven that one brand was better than the other.
Yep. No, I've seen some reports that like certain brand names might not be any different than some no-name battery that's like half the cost.
Yeah.
Do you use any type of power management, like a power box, anything like that?
No, just the Jetty central box. And usually I would choose the 210. I'm not a big fan of the polyfuses. In fact, I mean, I don't.
And then you use the.
I don't think that if you have
Sorry, go ahead.
a binding, I wouldn't want the plane to disconnect the servo. So that's why I wouldn't choose the one with the polyfuses. I would just choose the one, the 210. That's it. Keep it simple. Again, I would set an alert if I have too much consumption. I would just revert that function. Let's say I put the flaps down. I see that I have a problem. I'll just put the flaps up, land, and figure it out. But I wouldn't want that flap servo, to be disconnected or something.
What about the landing gear?
I think everything is good. I mean, electrons are superior to everything. JP works great. If I would buy an ultra flash, and I would probably get it with a JP. If I'll basically take what the manufacturer would recommend.
I was gonna mention before with Yeti, I know they have this system for reception where you can use also like I believe it's a 900 megahertz kind of backup signal.
Yeah.
Do you make use of that at all?
Jetty will kill me, but I don't like their 900. I think it's it wasn't proving to be. I mean, it works. Let's talk with that it works. So if on the ground, I would take away the 2.4, the 900 will kick in, everything will work great. Even in the air, it will work. I don't think the 900 is superior to the 2.4 in terms that when you're gonna lose 2.4, it wasn't. I haven't seen a proof that the 900 was working when the 2.4 was shut off. So personally, I don't put 900 in my planes. I think it could be a good feature if Jetty will improve a few things, especially if they would give us some logs that will show us the reception or the quality of reception in the receiver. Because right now they're giving us the quality of the whole way, like from the remote to the plane and back. And quite honestly, we don't care about the way back from the plane to us. We want to know what the plane got. It works nice because it still gives us an indication whether we're flying with a field with a lot of disturbances. For example, Kentucky Jets, I was flying, and you could get some warning of telemetry loss or weak signal because it was very congested.
Sounds scary.
So here's the thing: what would you rather? Would you rather know or just fly without knowing?
Oh yeah, I definitely would rather know and land immediately.
No, you don't have to land immediately. That's the point. You just need to not take like extreme risk. So, for example, if in regular field with no disturbances, I would go as far as the point where I won't see the plane. If I'm getting a warning, I'll just keep it a little bit closer. But that's the point, which is something great. You don't get it a lot with other. Well, I'm not sure if you don't get it completely with other manufacturers, but I don't think it's very common. So having that indication could be scary, but I rather know than not know.
Yeah.
Cool.
You've flown a lot of jets. Is there any particular plane jet that you haven't gotten to fly that you would really want to try out?
You know what? Before I get to that, I'll say one more thing about Jetty. I'm not a fan of their double path mode. So when I fly Jetty, and I think it's very important to say that to everybody, I always use default and the clone receiver. So basically, they have a system where you can have a default receiver, which works like every other brand, and then you can add as many clone receivers, and you can position whenever you want on the plane. I think this method is just bulletproof. It's amazing. Works great. So that's the last thing about the Jetty. What other plane do I want? I crashed my glider, my Kubuz 3. So I had a big turbine-powered glider. I crashed it because I actually don't know why. I think it's because of something in. Remember, we said that some planes, the build quality was not best, so I didn't build that one, and I probably has some kind of an electronic interference or something, and while just gliding, it spiraled into the ground for a reason that I still don't know. So that's my. So I need to restore it. So I need to build a new one because it's a really really cool plane. Other than that, I think the Diablo, which is like the Mephisto mini version, would be really cool. And what else? Oh, and an extra 330, the 2.6 meter.
The new one that yeah, those two, the Diablo and the Extra, those look really really fun.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind trying them out
So I
myself.
have an Extreme Flight MXS, which served me really well. And what I want to do is just want to transfer the DA 120 and all the servos, everything to that extra 330. And I'm working on a P-47, a beautifully detailed scale that CARF actually did all the weathering on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my my next project with a Mookie 250. And other than that, I'm building for friends. So I have the
That would be a pretty cool one.
yeah. So I have that SU that I'm building. I built two Rebel Maxes that I just finished last week, and a Bolt for Matias, my friend. An L39 for my friend Junior, and there's a Hawk, another Hawk that I'm going to build for a friend that's going to come in 2 weeks.
Oh.
Yeah, I like building.
Sounds like you're keeping busy.
Yeah, for me, building is like my therapy. It's really nice. I love it.
Awesome. Also looks like you have a pretty nice soap over there from what I can see here.
Oh yeah. I have a here. I'll give you a quick tour. So I have
Nice.
the 3-car garage. I have my very big table, lots of planes on the wall and on the ground. Easy access to the car. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Well, I don't want to take much more of your time. Maybe just to end here, do you have any kind of final words of advice for people either trying to get into jets or people that are just trying to improve their, their flying skills, building skills with jets?
Just to have fun, just to take it easy and invest in it, because at the end of the day, it's a very rewarding hobby. For me, it's I go to bed and I dream about the maneuvers that I'm gonna do in the next day, and I love it. So I think it could be very frustrating at the time, especially when you crash or something. But the idea is to take it easy, invest in build together with friends. That's priceless, and yeah, it's a beautiful hobby.
Well, thank you again for joining us. I think this was a great chat.
Yeah, great.
See ya.
Bye bye.